Okay, so my course is called Graphic Novels of Literary Canon, and my set text that I've chosen is Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' Watchmen. It's separated into 12 parts despite it being quite a heavy book, so students can kind of take it apart as they will. It's quite easy to just dissect into chunks, I suppose, which feeds directly into the assessment that I've chosen. Before I get into that, I want to talk about the learning outcomes that specifically tie into this assessment. So the two particular ones are to develop skills of textual and graphic analysis and the interpretation of their effects and relationship, and to hone the skills of communication of argument and discussion based on the analysis of graphic novels, both in a spoken and written context. Spoken being particularly important to this assessment that I've come up with. So my assessment is as follows. On a week of your choosing, lead class discussion about an allocated character from Moore and Gibbons' Watchmen, demonstrating the ability to formulate an understanding of how the characters' socio-political motivations are portrayed, both textually and graphically, with other members of the class. So I'm intending for this to be discussion that occurs between 3 or 4 class members that are being assessed, I suppose, at once, including discussion from the rest of the class, to kind of allow one for an appropriate amount of data for assessment on my behalf, because if I do 5 or 6 or 7 students at a time, it'll be a little bit chaotic and I won't get the data that I need. And at the same time, obviously, there's only 12 weeks in a year, or 12 weeks in a year's semester, so, I can only have so many students talking in 1 week. Additionally, for feedback, I'll be giving formal feedback with that assessment at the end, or when I've completed all the assessment feedback, and at the same time, I'll be giving some informal feedback during class after those, as well as students being able to give their own feedback to those students that are talking. So I'll be getting them to give a mark out of 10, as well as a small comment to kind of, I guess, give a reason for why they gave that number. So in a lot of ways, that's formal and informal feedback from students and myself as the teacher, to kind of contribute to the discussion, I suppose. And I'm feeding this through the teaching and learning activities that I've established thus far in the semester, in their relationship with the assessment, because having class-led discussion, obviously, I feel needs to first be bolstered by teacher-led discussion. So in my discussion that I'm doing in lectures, obviously I'll give opportunities for students to speak up and give evidence of their arguments, or to bolster mine, or disagree with mine through their own evidence gathering as well. Because at the end of the day, this is about confidence in talking to others as equals, really. So when I establish that in-class discussion, it'll be on a level that allows students to just speak their mind about the things they're discussing in the text and say those points with confidence based on the techniques they have with gathering evidence and arguments and the like. So they'll be reasoning with those formal ALOs, particularly the ability to do spoken analysis, I guess. And I'm framing this particularly through Sambell, McDowell, and Montgomery's 6 principles of feedback. I'm not going to list them, but I'll go through some of the factors that I have that kind of, I guess, feed into that. Students will be taking control of the discussion and will be encouraged to add to the discussion through additional evidence and counter-argument. At the end of the day, this is about confidence building rather than written assessment. So at the end of the day, I feel that that spoken kind of aspect of literary discussion is just as important as writing and literary authorship, I suppose. So the confidence in that way that they build comes from actually undertaking that spoken activity with the rest of their class. And I guess they get feedback in informal and formal ways, as I've spoken before, from my feedback and from their other students' feedback, as well as, I suppose, people interacting with their argument is in a lot of ways feedback too. So there's a lot of ways to get informal and formal feedback at the same time through engagement with or criticism from those points that they might come up with on the character that they're discussing. There'll also be, I guess, in a lot of ways, like I've mentioned before, they'll be guided to that point of student discussion as opposed to teacher-led discussion, because I'm going to kind of wean them into that kind of discussion as a confidence builder, because at the end of the day, if I were to just throw them into that deep end, it's a little bit chaotic. It's not an authentic way to kind of assess students on their ability to argue and develop discussion. I guess the idea of this assessment is twofold, in that this works as a benchmark for their confidence in talking about their skills, and at the same time, it's also a stepping stone for later assessments, particularly the written assessments at the end of this semester that I'm hoping to establish. Because at the end of the day, if you can develop an argument on the fly in class, then if you've got prep time for writing an essay at the end, you're likely to be much more confident in developing your argument, I feel. So it's a bit more of a fragmentary manner to develop a fulfillment of those ILOs, but at the end of the day, the spoken and the written aspects are both just as important, particularly for that latter written assessment, and again beyond my unit that I'm taking. At the end of the day, it's not just about reading a speech verbatim. It's not about getting up on a podium and just talking it out. It's about reasoning and defending with your argument on the fly, and obviously being supported by the evidence that you gather throughout the semester, or as you're flicking through when other students are responding to what you've said. It's not really supposed to be an oral form of essay response, and instead an aspect of literary discussion that's considered in the same way as written authorship. So in a lot of ways, that's the way that I intend to make it as authentic and complex as a written assessment. At the end of the day, that kind of leads into my question, because I'm trying to kind of establish an authentic balance between controlled environment, or uncontrolled, I suppose, as much as possible in that student-on-student engagement. So my question is there a completely authentic balance between a controlled environment and student-on-student engagement that can be achieved? And is there a way to gather authentic data from there? Thanks.